Welcome back to the Lone Screenplay Nominee Podcast, where we discuss in detail films that either got a lone writing Oscar or was nominated only in the writing categories. I'm your host, Matthew Anderson, and today we have Jeffrey Kare back on the show. Hey, Jeffrey, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, and I guess third time's charm is this time we're not here for revenge.
Revenge. Okay, all right, okay. Don't know what you really mean, what you mean by that, but
Well,
well,
because we previously talked about revenge films on the show, such as Promising Young Woman and Sweeney Todd.
oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I thought this was like we're not talking about revenge films as in like this is payback, and I'm like, wait, did I do something to Jeffrey? What did I do?
Oh no, no,
Okay,
oh
all
no,
right,
no.
okay, good. All right, whew. All right. So that's all right. That's what I mean. All right, cool. Well, yeah, I think you picked a really interesting film. If nothing else, we have a interesting discussion for an interesting film. So, yeah. So before we get into our discussion, if you listen to our other episodes, the format is similar. We will go over our spoilers and our discussion for said film that has been chosen for the episode. If you haven't seen Splendor in the Grass yet, go out and see it so you can come back to listen to us talk about the film in full. With that said, I'm gonna notify the audience what the premise is in case they're like, "Wait, what is this premise of this like I don't know, 80-year-old, 70-year-old movie at least?"
Well,
Like,
almost 65.
oh, okay, 65. All right, so I overshot it. I apologize. I'm sorry. um,
Well, nobody's perfect.
yeah, the premise of the film revolves around Bud and his high school sweetheart, Deanie, who are weighed down by their parents' oppressive expectations, which threaten the future of their relationship. Deanie's mother and Bud's father cautions their children against engaging in a sexual relationship, but for opposing reasons. Deanie's mother thinks Bud won't marry a girl with loose morals, while Bud's father is afraid of marriage and pregnancy that would ruin Bud's future at Yale. And then we get into a lot of very dramatic and pretty depressing situations our both of our characters get into, which I was not expecting for the film. So you definitely caught me off guard with that, Jeffrey. Uh, so yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. So Splendor in the Grass was directed by Elia Kazan, who was a previous two-time Oscar winner for Best Director and is a known rat, as he went before the House Un-American Activities Committee to notify them on who was a potential communist. Yeah, and as for the film itself, it stars Natalie Wood, Warren Beatty, which I believe was his acting debut for like a lead role at least.
Yeah,
Pat
it's at
Hing.
least his motion picture debut.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So you have Warren Beatty, Pat Hingle, Audrey Christine, Barbara Loden, Zoran Lampert, and Joanna Roos. Once again, I apologize for mucking up those pronunciations. But sometimes you gotta wing it. So yeah. So Jeffrey, you had recommended for us to do this episode when I got this main podcast back up and running, and you had even texted me saying, uh, "You're bringing the show back. Can we still do Splendor in the Grass?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, we could do it." And I was curious as to know as I was curious in knowing why this movie. What was there something about this that really stood out to you on your watch when you'd seen it, whenever it was?
Uh, well, okay. So prior to my first appearance on the show, talking about Promising Young Woman, this was one of the films I listed off as something I'd be interested in discussing. And after we recorded the Sweeney Todd episode, you were the one who suggested, you looked back at the list and suggested Splendor in the Grass, and I was like, sure.
Okay, yeah, because I can't even remember. It's been so long ago, honestly. Like everything's happened. There's been just so much that's gone on since we did the Sweeney Todd episode to now that I'm like, what did we like? What was the reasoning as to why this episode was chosen? But regardless, so what'd you think of the movie?
Okay, so I first learned about this movie a little over 20 years ago, and it was through this big book, which I still have, that lists the nominees and winners of every Oscar ceremony from the very first through 2003. So, yeah, my copy's pretty dated at this point, but anyway. In the 1961 section, I was compelled to find that Natalie Wood received the Best Actress nomination that year, but it wasn't for West Side Story. In fact, from having done some research a few years ago, she's one of at least 10 actors who appeared in the Oscar winner for Best Picture and also received an acting nomination that same year, but for a different movie.
Yeah, and it's funny uh because you bring that up and it just made my brain going the last like day or so into thinking, like how many times has this happened where we've had someone in a Best Picture nominee and they get nominated for another film that isn't the Best Picture nominee. But that's interesting you brought up about
The Best
uh
Picture winner.
yeah, with like yeah, with West Side Story, because West Side Story was like a big movie at the time, and I mean for obvious reasons. I mean, even if you look at the two performances, it's like, yeah, you can see why she got nominated for this over West Side Story. But again, we'll talk about the award section later. As for
Oh,
the movie
yes.
itself, Splendor of the Grass, because you had seen it before me. Am I correct in saying that?
Oh, yeah. The first time I saw it was during the early days of COVID in May 2020. As a longtime fan of the And the Runner Up Is podcast, I watched it in preparation for Kevin Jacobson's Twitter survey, where he was asking people to rank the acting nominees of 1961. And glad I caught up with this film beforehand, as well. It's gonna be an well, precursor to what we'll discuss with the award section. It's become my favorite Best Original Screenplay win of the 1960s.
Yeah. All right. Nice. I'm trying to even think on the top of my head, like what else was like what would be my personal favorite of the screenplay winners we've had, like in the original screenplay category. But I'll have to look at the list later. So yeah, and yeah, so already it sounds like you're a pretty big fan of the movie. If I'm correct in saying, okay. Um, yeah. As for me, I hadn't seen this ever, and I had forgotten that outside of West Side Story, I've actually seen a couple of Natalie Wood's films. I saw A Miracle on 34th Street a couple years ago for the first time. Um, and I had seen her in Rebel Without a Cause back at Stevenson University, like before the pandemic, which I was like, uh, yeah. So it was very interesting to see, you know, to see more of Natalie Wood's movies, and she's just one of those actors or actresses where even though something like this came out 10 years before she had died, or no, 20 years before she had died, I still come away from it, from these kind of movies, thinking, oh man, like look at the career that she could have had, because you see movies like this, like Splendor in the Grass, and you see the potential she had. I mean, she still had a good career with what she had, but it's just her life was just taken away so short. And in a weird way, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, Jeffrey. The film itself, Splendor in the Grass, adds a bit of like tragedy to the story. I mean, whether it's intentional or not. Both from the fact that again, like you see her acting chops in this, and you're like, she was a really terrific actress, and she did a couple more movies after, at least a couple more after this one. I mean, she'd been around for 20 more years in the industry. But also when you look at a film like this and you're going through the first half of the film like I was, and I just thought, yeah, this is kind of a frolicky slice of life kind of movie. It's a bit more slower paced. It's a slow burn. And then we get to the second half of the story, and I'm like, oh, like this is where a lot of the tragedy, darker complexity elements come into play. Um, and for that element alone, I mean, and also to Natalie Wood and Warren Beatty's performances are surprisingly good. I like Warren Beatty as an actor overall, but I thought he was surprisingly good in this. I'm not like I haven't fell in love with him as an actor, but there's at least enough respect and admiration for him that I've gotten from his movies I've seen so far. But yeah, by the end of the film, I was like, yeah, I enjoyed enough of it to where I could say I could recommend this.
And I also happen to be a fan of director Elia Kazan's work. I mean, On the Waterfront is actually among my top 10 favorite movies of all time. A Streetcar Named Desire is my all time favorite film adaptation of a stage play, and Splendor in the Grass is my third favorite of his repertoire. I mean, with a master director like him at the helm, you just know this is going to be something engrossing. And I also thought, the way that he, along with screenwriter William Inge, have balanced out both main storylines between Deanie and Bud is quite successful.
Yeah, they. they do a good job balancing the two, especially when you get to the second half of the story. They're both dealing with their own personal issues, internal issues, with um, especially with Deanie, who's off to the mental ward, and then you have Bud, who just doesn't want to go to Yale at all, and he's practically flunking out of college. And they both end up meeting. It's funny because they both have their first crush with each other in high school, and then they end up splitting off from each other. And when they do meet their, the people that they end up marrying by the end of the film, I mean, it's heavily implied that Deanie marries the guy from the mental ward who ends up becoming a doctor. It's funny how they both, in a weird way, shared, something that reminds them of their first crushes, but also are completely different people. Both, like, especially in persona, from what we see of very little of what we see of them. And I think that's interesting that it, in a way, I guess the film is trying to comment about how, that your first love will, you'll still admire and appreciate the fact that they were there for them, assuming if it's a healthy relationship. But eventually you're going to have to grow up and get out of the, that era and move on to, be a grown up, just like the poem for, well, I think it was like the poem or passage that Deanie read for Splendor in the Grass. So yeah, and look, I said before, Elia Kazan, I mentioned he was a rat, but as far as like an actual filmmaker, I do agree with you. He's a very talented guy. You've seen him, Streetcar Named Desire. He gave us like some of the one of the best ensembles ever put on stage and film. And even got Marlon Brando an Oscar nomination, and all these other actors in the film were terrific too. And then even On the Waterfront is another great movie that I saw as well. It was like, I think during the pandemic era. But yeah, that's a great movie.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, like Kazan, like he does a good job directing the movie. Like I appreciate it for the film being in the 1960s. He's able to tackle what are very complex issues, especially with what women were allowed to be. Like, oh, you're not supposed to have these, sexual desires of sorts. Like the mother of Deanie keeps telling her that, and in reality, it's like she has these feelings bottled up inside of her, to where she has, if I'm correct in saying, she has like a mental breakdown at the school. Was that what was they were trying to get across?
I think so.
Because I kept thinking the whole time, I was like, I'm a little bit confused what's going on here. But then, yeah, as the film went on, I'm like, oh, okay, gotcha. All right. Definitely not a movie that you should, a lot of these movies nowadays, they're being made to be like, oh, we're going to, feed you the plot every 5 minutes and tell you what's going on just in case you're on your phones. And this one's like, no, no,
Oh,
no,
the
no.
Netflix
Yeah,
factor.
the Netflix effect. Yeah, whereas this one's like, no, no, you need to pay attention the whole way, even if the first half is very slow and drawn out.
Yeah, and as longtime Oscar followers probably know, the Academy rarely ever recognizes teen films, especially given how their membership by and large consists of a bunch of old geezers. I mean, the most recent exceptions are Juno and Ladybird, yet with those two, they were dealing with more adult issues than something like Mean Girls, which skews very young, and this one in particular is an early example of a teen film with adult issues that earned Oscar noms and a win in major categories.
That is true, because I remember people at the time, when, I mean, even looking back on it now, 20 years later, people were like, why the hell wasn't Mean Girls nominated for even like adapted screenplay when it got a WGA nod? And it's like, well, I mean, it's not the kind of film that the Academy would really gravitate towards. And this one does deal with very, very dramatic themes with Splendor in the Grass. And I, again, like, if you had told me in the first like 5 minutes of the movie, oh, don't worry, Matt, this gets like really dark and very somewhat complex, I was like, oh, really, this movie, a movie where Natalie Wood's a very beautiful girl falls in love with like a very handsome suave, Warren Beatty character. I'm like, give me a break, get out of here with that. And then, like I said, but like I keep reiterating this over and over again. It's like that second half is like, oh, I didn't think it was gonna get this dark. Especially when I mean, even some of that is a bit foreshadowed even earlier in that first half where Bud's sister ends up getting drunk, highly drunk at the party, and she almost gets assaulted in one of the cars outside of the party, and then Bud, barely saves his sister. And that in of itself is like that's a sign of like what may potentially, like it's like that's not going to be the only dark scene of the movie, guys. Like there's going to be more to it, which I appreciated from Elia Kazan and William Inge, um, for doing. So yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely. Since anyone who's seen a Kazan film knows he doesn't strive for feel good.
Yeah, and I think it also, yeah, maybe that's also another thing I forgot was the fact that it was Elia Kazan directing it. Because, like I said, it's been a minute since I saw Streetcar Named Desire, and I think On the Waterfront had a couple of dark moments as well, like very complex issues that he dealt with in a very mature manner. Because if you put this script in the hands of a lesser director, they would they wouldn't really dare touch the complexities of what Splendor in the Grass does. With with the Dini character trying to commit suicide, with Bud's father, committing suicide himself because of the Wall Street crash. Which, and that was the other thing too about the movie as well, is like nice foreshadowing in terms of like the movie does a good job of putting these characters, very fictional characters, within a historical context. Because without the time period of this being in the 1920s, it just wouldn't have captured that effect that you would get from, let's say, if you were to do a modern telling of this. And it's like, I don't know, there's not really much you could do to adapt this to like a modern audience. Like it kind of has to be in this time period because it fits so well with the aesthetic of the look and even with what the characters are going through in the moment. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, in fact, the story was actually based on people whom William Inge actually knew while he grew up in Kansas in the 1920s. So yeah, he had plenty of inspiration.
And even the characters themselves, despite them feeling so stock for some, it works for the time period it is. I mean, this in a way, I would also kind of argue a little bit that this is almost like some of these characters do feel, and I don't know if they were, because when I'm doing the podcast episodes, I'm not starting from the back and then working my way forward into the modern films like other podcasts are. So I kind of lose a bit of grasp of like what was the time period like in terms of how certain films were made. So I almost wonder if some of the stereotypes we see with the classmates in school are what we eventually see down the road for other, teenage drama, high school stuff that we see, especially with something like Mean Girls, let's say, or films like that take on that approach.
That's a good question. And now I haven't seen this one, but this movie was actually remade as a TV movie in 1981 with Melissa Gilbert, Ned Beatty, and a young Michelle Pfeiffer. And I haven't seen that one, and it doesn't appear to be streaming anywhere. But yeah, I don't know if that tried to address the story with more modern sensibilities while still keeping it with the 1920s. But well, I don't know, maybe something interesting to check out at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it was. It's a little bit trickier also to find older movies, not just on streaming service, but even trying to go through libraries and trying to rent them out on Amazon Prime. Like, so I wouldn't be surprised if uh, that version is just not existent anymore. But it
Or if
would
it's
be
even
like
on YouTube.
yeah, that too. Yeah, because you'd be surprised how many old films are on YouTube and how many older films are not, even though they're very like popularized within film Twitter media or community in of itself, I should say. Were there any other notes that am I while we're talking about the movie, is there anything else that I'm missing in regards to what you wanted to bring up about Splendor in the Grass?
Well, I do want to touch on the performances. Like, Natalie Wood, if you ask me, this is her finest hour. I mean, she very impressively gets to display quite a range of emotions from start to finish, especially with her facial expressions alone.
Yeah, she's really good, and uh, I will admit she does a little, just a little bit, with go a little bit over the top with some of her screaming, but it does it does make sense for her to play a teenager where she has a lot of these big emotions, and as a kid you think to yourself, oh well, the world, it's like a I guess like a life or death situation where it's like it has to go my way, or this is like the worst day ever in my entire life, and in reality it's like, no, that's how it's always gonna be. Sometimes you get things that you want, sometimes you don't. But yeah, Natalie Wood, she was really good. I mean, even then with like the I guess like the nitpicks I have with the performance, it's probably, yeah, it might be my favorite performance of hers.
Yeah, and as for Warren Beatty, now something Kazan was synonymous with was striving for cinematic realism, which he often achieved by discovering and working with unknown actors, many of whom treated him as their mentor, which gave him the flexibility to depict social reality with both accuracy and vivid intensity. And he also felt that casting the right actors accounted for 90% of a movie's ultimate success or failure, and Beatty, in his motion picture debut, I felt gave quite a charismatic performance and shared excellent on screen chemistry with Wood.
Yeah, he's really good in the movie, and I guess it also helps too that he learned from the greats, not just from actors themselves, but also directors, because Warren Beatty would go on to direct movies himself. You had like Dick Tracy. He won his Oscar for Reds. He did like I think it was like a remake of Heaven Can Wait with Buck Henry,
Oh,
which
yes.
got a director nomination, and Bullworth. So he's done, and also Bullworth will be covered on the Lone Screenplay Nominee podcast down the road. Um, so that'll be an interesting episode to cover for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's good in this. And am I actually? How far after this was Bonnie and Clyde made? In like,
About 6 years later.
oh wow, okay, so damn, because I remember that was his first Oscar nomination he had gotten, and he already established himself as like a big name actor, if I remember correctly, when he did Bonnie and Clyde, or at least that put him on the map as like, okay, now you're really known to Hollywood people.
Yeah, yeah, even though this one did win him a Golden Globe in the now retired category of Most Promising Male Newcomer.
Yep. Yeah, and yeah, we'll definitely talk about that later on in the show. As for the other performances in the film, I mean, again, Warren Beatty and Natalie Wood have really good chemistry with each other. You definitely buy them as not just, well, you buy enough of them as teenagers, but you definitely buy them falling in love with each other. But I thought everyone else in the film did a good job. I know that there were some people I had discovered were not a fan of Bud's father's, the actor who played Bud's father, and he could be a little bit what do you call it? Screeching at times, but I think it works enough for the character. I mean, even his moment where he has with his son at the club where they go to in New York City, I thought kind of does a good job establishing this sense of what's the word I'm looking for? Like you get the feeling like of him being this like very desperate man of sorts, where he's like, you can have any girl you want, any girl you want. You don't have to stick for that Deanie girl at the ward. You could have any girl, even that girl on stage who even though you say like, yeah, she looks a little like her, no, that is her. She looks exactly like her, and it's like you could tell something's off with this guy, not just how weird he is, but also just you know like the clocks are turning of sorts, where it's like he's losing his money because of the Wall Street crash, and he's contemplating suicide, so at least he wants to give like one last hurrah of sorts for his son before he goes.
Hmm.
At least that's the way
Well,
I
yeah.
interpreted.
Oh, yeah. And we should say the actor was Pat Hingle, who,
Yes.
many probably were more familiar with as Commissioner Gordon in the Tim Burton Joel Schumacher Batman films. And I personally found him pretty memorable here.
I did not know that was him. Okay, I was thinking to myself, why does this actor look so familiar? And I was like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, Jeffrey's probably going to bring it up later, or I'll find out after we're done recording and be like, who's this guy? Um, yeah, and also big props to I'm looking up who played the actress for the mother.
Audrey Christie.
Audrey Christie. She was good in the movie. I liked. I thought, yeah, I thought she did a good job. Audrey Christie played Deanie's mother, right?
Oh yes.
Okay. I thought she did a really good job with her role. Because even from the beginning, I liked her a very bubbly persona, and even though she's very much treating her she's very overly protective. Like, the actress is able to find a good job of noticing when her daughter is feeling a bit blue or feeling a little bit down. That bathtub scene, which she asks her, like, have you been uh what was the I'm trying to think, like, what was the exact words. Let me look through my notes real quick. What was the exact word she said to her? I can't remember. Okay, so I didn't write the notes down. But pretty much she says to her, like, have you been spoiled? Have you been, have you had sex with Bud? And even that moment where Natalie Wood's character, Deanie, visits her parents in the ward, and the way she reacts to her parents, I thought was, like, really good acting from both the mother and the father. And just yeah, like, really dramatic moments like that do make the film more than just a teenage dramatic flick that we'd usually get around that time.
Oh yeah, I definitely found Christie to be, very heartfelt overall. And I should point out that it's also cool to see early roles from Sandy Dennis and Phyllis Diller in this one.
Phil, why do they sound familiar? What have they done that was, like,
Well,
famous?
Sandy Dennis 5 years later won an Oscar for a supporting role in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Was she one of the friends of Natalie Woods?
Yeah, I believe she was one of her classmates.
Oh wow, I didn't even notice. Went right over my head because, like I said, I'm watching the movie and I just kept focusing on Warren Beatty and Natalie Wood. Everyone else, I'm like, yeah, I might have seen it before. I don't know. Um, I'm glad I brought
Yeah,
you on for this, Jeffrey, because
well,
I would not have noticed that.
yeah, meanwhile, Phyllis Diller is a showbiz legend. Well, was a showbiz legend. This was, like Warren Beatty, this was also her first movie role. And, Phyllis Diller went on to have quite a career on stage and screen. And she even, she even got to voice yeah, she voiced the Queen Ant in A Bug's Life. She's been on the Carol Burnett show. Oh, she had her own show, the Phyllis Diller show. She's been on Hollywood Squares, Dean Martin, Bob Hope, A Match Game, Ed
Oh my
Sullivan,
god,
you name it.
I am so stupid.
Well,
Oh,
oh,
yeah, that's that. I mean, yeah, I egg on my face because, like I said, it's like, well, yeah, yeah, because I was wondering, like, Phyllis Dillis. I'm like, why does that name sound so familiar? I'm like, oh, Bugs Life. Okay, gotcha. Um, yeah, and I also want to comment on the movie too. One of the aspects of the film I did appreciate, even though I don't have the composer's name on my phone or on my computer at all right now at the moment. I like the score. It's not one that I would personally nominate per se, or be like, oh, I'm outraged it didn't get nominated. But I thought it fit really well, like especially with the use of the saxophone, which nowadays would be used as, like, a parody
hmm.
for these kind of, like, dramatic tragedy type movies. But I thought it worked really well, especially with how it sets up and establishes our environment and the time period within the first 5 minutes of the film.
Oh, yeah, I too loved the musical score by David Amram.
That's
So,
who it is.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Who I don't know I guess what other work he's done, but hey, this definitely made an impression on me.
Yeah, and he's just, yeah, he did a good job with the score. Didn't really feel like it was used inappropriately either, which is something that I have been noticing about some of these films is when I watch, some of the older films, I'm like, okay, yeah, a lot of the score here is just not used well, but this one I thought was used pretty well. But yeah, he did a good job. And I'm looking through. Boris
Yeah, he.
Kaufman.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, you first.
Well, I was gonna say Boris Kaufman was the cinematographer on the film, and I believe he had won an Oscar on the waterfront. He did the cinematography for this, and he also did 12 Angry Men. Uh, and he had some really gorgeous shots displayed in the film. I especially love how he framed Deanie trying, running up to the waterfall. I think it was where she's on. I thought that was like with all the guys, they're all jumping in trying to save her from swimming over the edge. I thought the way that scene was shot was really well done and choreographed. And yeah, it's a good looking film. So yeah, he did a good job with the look of the film.
Yeah, and what I was about to say was that David Amron is, as of now, still alive at age 95.
Congratulations! Yeah, that good for David. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and he
Um,
also scored the original Manchurian Candidates after this.
nice. Okay, yeah, that's another film I got to get around to because everyone keeps telling me, especially my grandma. She's like, "Oh, you got to watch The Manchurian Candidate." And I'm like, "I'll get around to it down the road,
Okay,
um, maybe."
yeah,
But
yes.
we'll see what happens. I'm looking through to see if there's anything else major
Well,
about the
well,
movie I want to bring up. Go
well,
ahead.
well, well. Would you like to dive more into the scene where Deanie attempts suicide?
Yeah, sure. What would you like to bring up about it?
Well, I remember the first time I watched it. Now, this is on in my letterbox review of the film when I first saw it, which I had to turn spoiler on to, because, just in case. And now, when Deanie attempted suicide by jumping into a pond that leads directly to a waterfall, it just felt so cathartic, not just because of what's on screen, but also given what happened to Natalie Wood in 1981 when she was found dead in the ocean.
Yeah, there is. That's another aspect of the film that does play a bit of irony to it. Like, not dramatic, very dark irony, I should say, is that again she died of drowning, and it's just something that it does add a layer to the film in a very unintentional way, much like it did with like Rebel Without a Cause. I remembered where you have a big star actor like James Dean who died so tragically, like even more young at the time than Natalie Wood, because at least Natalie Wood had done at least like 20 years worth of work, and James Dean only had 3 movies on his hand. It was like Rebel Without a Cause, he had East of Eden, and Giant was like another one he had done, and I think that was it. Everything else, he
Mhm.
hasn't done anything before or after for obvious reasons. Um, but yeah, I mean that does weirdly enough does fit with the darker themes of what Splendor in the Grass is talking about. Um, which is it's just something unavoidable. It's just, yeah, so it's just something that uh yeah, I forgot, yeah, that she had also died of a drowning as well. But yeah, good note on that, cuz yeah, that's something that I'm like, huh, yeah.
Well, yeah, in fact, when she died, she had just finished filming a movie with Christopher Walken in my area of Raleigh, North Carolina called Brainstorm. Well, at that point, principal photography had not yet wrapped up. They were on hiatus before eventually resuming in Hollywood, and I actually have met a local actor who had a bit part in that film named Ira David Wood III. And no, he's not related to Natalie, but he is Evan Rachel Wood's father. He even runs a theater company down here.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, just it's a small world after all. Um
Yes.
yeah. Um yeah, yeah, and I'm trying to look through to see if there's anything else in my notes, cuz I did write a fair amount of notes down for this. Actually, there was one element I wanted to bring up about the film. I appreciate the writer William to do a good job with, and the fact that I like the role reversal of Bud and Deanie, where Bud shows up at the hospital after a basketball game, and Deanie's there to show moral support for him. And then when Deanie's in the hospital after having her like nervous breakdown episode, she has, or no, it was the suicide attempt. Um, Bud shows up at the hospital for moral support as well. So I was very appreciative of William bringing that into the story, and yeah, and it wasn't just, oh, the girl is just, we're gonna write this character as a very stock, oh, I'm, my ex-boyfriend athlete has fallen, I'm gonna be there to support him kind of character. And it's like, no, the tables are there as well for her, favoring her, I should say, when Bud shows up, even though they're not together. um and yeah, so I appreciated William trying to adding that in, because again, we usually just see the woman just there for moral support at the hospital, but then not for, when that character is at the hospital too. So yeah, I appreciated that. There's a couple of good lines in the film, but one that really worked for me, or one that was like, that's a good bite for the dialogue, was when someone had said, Ginny Stamper is too low for the dogs to bite.
Hmm.
And I thought that was a good line to establish right then and there what kind of character Bud's sister was. Without even go, like, they go into like what exactly it is, but just a nice way to establish immediately what kind of character she is. So I appreciated that. And I also love the interaction Ginny has with her dad, where she's like, I'm gonna go to California and study art, and the dad's like, art who? So I thought that was good. Again, in a very dramatic film, this can have a couple of comedic moments,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's mostly in the first half of the story, I would say.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, gotta keep the tone consistent.
yeah, exactly, and that's the other thing too about the film I like, is that it's a very consistent tone. It's not, despite the character, we're going back and forth between Deanie and uh, Bud. It doesn't really fluctuate between different tones. It stays that tone throughout the film, and I appreciated that element of the film that a lot of writers and even directors tend to think to themselves, "Oh, well, I'm like the best writer or director in the world. We could balance as many tones as possible." It's like juggling like a lot of bowling ball pins, and like, okay, now let's set one on fire and see what happens as we're still juggling them all. And it's like, no, oh, let's do it on a tricycle. It's like, no, you can't do that, guys. Like William and Eli realized, okay, we know what the film is, we know what the tone is for the film, and we know that this is a very serious story, so let's treat it in a very respectful manner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is there any other major thoughts you wanted to bring up about the film itself that I haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think we should probably touch on the ending, which is a bittersweet one at that.
I appreciated it ending the way it does. I was a little bit worried it was going to go for a Hollywood happy ending, which it does allude to, as like maybe this could happen when we get a nice moment with the father of Deanie telling her, "Oh, I know exactly where Bud is. He's off on the ranch." And here you treat, this, the father is very much treated as like a like the kind of that we get the humor off of with his interactions with like him sleeping, snoring in bed, him sleeping in church, and then he wakes up and he's like, "Oh, that was a good sermon, good sermon." And little things like that. But that was like one of the few times where it's like, okay, I appreciated that they didn't make that the dad character all like just jokes and that's it. Like we don't have a serious character with him. And I mean, even he does change over the course of the film when Deanie gets admitted to the mental ward. But that was a nice moment. But as for the ending itself, I like that they subverted our expectations. I like that they didn't give us a happy ending. I mean, they kind of do with their own ways, but they're not. You're not seeing the characters together. And as I alluded to earlier, they both realized that they appreciated that they were there for each other when they needed to, but in reality it's like that poem that Natalie Wood's character read, where it's like you're just a splinter in the grass, where it's like you're gonna grow, you're gonna essentially, yeah, grow out of this section of your life and move on to the next part, the next chapter of your life, I should say.
Oh yeah, it was nice to see Deanie reunites with Bud as he's now a married father, while she will be getting married to someone else soon. And so yeah, it was nice to see a friendly reunion while they also parted ways from each other.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just it's bittersweet, but I think it works for the film. I feel like if it had gone for the two, open arms, and then they're like, "Oh, I forget the guy. I'm gonna marry Bud," and it's like, yeah, that kind of cheapens it, honestly. Like, yeah, you got a happy ending, but it kind of cheapens the ending for us. And it handles but the ending we get is a much more naturalistic approach to the story, which I appreciate.
Agreed. And I guess for final thoughts on from me on the film itself, Splendor in the Grass is very deeply felt all around and is one of my favorites from 1961.
Yeah, and I could see why too. Like I said, it took me until the second half to finally to have myself be won over enough by the film. I would have liked the first half to be a little bit more quicker paced, or have us get to the more interesting elements of the film, or at least find something in that first half to get me more invested. But I still enjoyed the film overall, and I would also, as I said before, I'd recommend it because I think there's enough in here that I think everyone could appreciate. And if nothing else, watch it for Natalie Wood's performance, who is just a national treasure. And once again, it's like it's it's just unfortunate. We're I know she did 20 more years worth of film work, but it's so unfortunate that we could have had more performances from her. Um, and she's no longer here with us. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to end that part on a downer. But to raise our spirits up a little bit, we're gonna jump into our award section of the show. Shall we?
Yes.
So Splendor of the Grass was released in theaters on October 10th, 1961, and was a success for critics and made money at the box office. The film was nominated at the Golden Globes for four categories, and as Jeffrey had mentioned earlier, won the Most Promising Performer male category for Warren Beatty. It was nominated for the DGA for Elia Kazan, and got 2 Oscar nominations for Natalie Wood in lead actress and original screenplay. However, the film only picked up the Oscar for the original screenplay category over La Dolce Vita, which won the costume design black and white category, Ballad of a Soldier, General della Rovere, and Lover Come Back. The latter 3 were lone screenplay, lone writing nominations, which I will cover on the show later on down the road. We'll see what happens with those episodes. I don't know when they're gonna be out, but they'll come out when when they're ready. But yeah, as I'm reading this off, I mean it's a little bit easier as to why this won the Oscar for original screenplay. But I'm gonna play stupid for you Jeffrey, and I'm gonna pass the baton off to you and ask, why do you think this managed to win the Oscar for original screenplay over this lineup?
Well, in a lineup that consisted of no Best Picture nominees, let's break this down one by one. Most of the original screenplay contenders that year, as you alluded to, Ballad of a Soldier, General della Rovere, and Lover Come Back, had no other nominations, so there clearly wasn't really any passion for either of them. Meanwhile, La Dolce Vita arguably came close to a Best Picture nod as it showed up in 3 other categories, including Best Director for Fellini. But looking at his overall run with the Oscars, it seems that Academy members back in the day by and large respected his work but weren't passionate enough to give him a win, and that's not counting any of the Best International Feature wins, as those are awarded to the country, not the filmmakers.
I'm looking through. I actually just want to make sure. Oh, it wasn't even nominated for international film. Okay, that's interesting. Huh. Through a Glass
Yeah.
Darkly ended up winning that category. Okay. Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Now, with Splendor in the Grass, it was the only Best Original Screenplay nominee to have also shown up in an acting category, and with the actors branch being the largest branch of the Academy, I think that might have helped it here.
It did, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because I was going to say the exact same thing about Splendor in the Grass. Is that while La Dolce Vita got a director nomination, I mean Natalie Wood getting that actress nomination really did help. Even though you would think on paper, oh, La Dolce Vita's got this because it got a director nod, it got in for screenplay, it got in for costume or won costumes, I should say, and you think to yourself, well, yeah, it's going to win. It's like, nope, they're going to go with Splendor in the Grass. I also wonder if I don't know if it played that much of a factor. Maybe in campaigning wise, it might have. But I wonder if the fact that William was a known award-winning playwright and novelist, to where he had won a Pulitzer Prize for drama for writing Picnic on the Stage, and was nominated for the Tony for Best Play with Bus Stop and The Dark at the Top of the Stairs. I wonder if that helped its chances out, as like, okay, we have a notable playwright writing an original screenplay for the film with, again, complex issues at the times that they wouldn't be able to dabble into. I wonder if that helped Williams' chances out. I'd had to imagine, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's also worth noting that two of his plays, Comeback Little Sheep and Picnic, and well, at least those two, were previously adapted into Oscar winning feature films, so Academy members were clearly aware of his work, even though he didn't write the screenplay for either of those two film adaptations. But, you know, again, so it probably helped to have that establishment factor.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll talk more about Lover Come Back on a future episode, but what I could say is that while co-writer Stanley Shapiro was a previous winner for Pillow Talk, that film got more Oscar nominations than Lover Come Back. After all, only a handful of films managed to win the writing Oscar as their film's lone nomination, and the last one to do it was Designing Woman, which was a couple years prior to this. So it's pretty rare that you get a lone screenplay nominee winning the Oscar. Like it's like nothing has even done it even in the 21st century.
No, and well, yeah. I mean, granted, now that we have the Kirsten Dunst role in place, it should be interesting to see if we'll get another ones at some point in the future.
As like a lone screenplay
Nominee to
nominee
win.
to win. Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, I'm like, I think we're still getting lone screenplay nominees. It's just, this just happened to be like this past year just happened to be one that just didn't work out. Um, but yeah, I don't know if we're ever going to for like a lone screenplay winner. I mean, it also would have, I'd have to assume it would have to happen when there's no best picture nominees in the lineup. But as we're seeing, the best picture field is expanded to 10. Those chances are probably going to be decreased as the years have gone by, are going to go by. So yeah. Um, yeah. And then the only thing I'll say in terms of like the lead actress category, actually, you know what? I want to pass the baton back off to you on that. Why do you think Natalie Wood didn't win lead actress? Because I believe you have seen all the lead actress nominees that year, right?
Oh, yes, I have.
Okay.
And yeah, well, it's interesting, especially given that she was one of the stars of the Best Picture winner that year. It's kind of surprising that, that visibility didn't help her out here. But then again, we don't often see actors win Oscars for playing teenagers, with, probably the most recent exception being Timothy Hudson for Ordinary People.
No.
And yeah, well, again, I guess Sophia Loren winning for Two Women kind of predates the more international inspired wins we get in this day and age. And, and I guess since this was, an era, well, again, where campaigning was a lot different, I mean, I guess those who probably saw all the nominees, including Sophia Loren, they were probably most wowed by her performance.
Yeah, I unfortunately I did not get a chance to watch Two Women. I tried a couple of times to get around to it, but it just didn't work within my schedule. But from what I have been told, it also helped that Sophia Loren had a career that was known for being a bombshell in comedies within Italian cinema. And with this film showcasing her dramatic chops, it created that narrative that allowed her to beat her competition. I mean, even Joseph E. Levin, who distributed Embassy Pictures and agreed to buy the U.S. rights, said that he campaigned for the film just because she believed she could win the Oscar, and he did it. He did the campaigning by just having that film being screened at every city that had an Oscar voter in, so that way everyone got a chance to watch that movie, despite it being like a lone acting nominee. So good on Embassy Pictures for saying, like, we're gonna defy the odds. We're gonna beat the the supposed underdog, whatever it is, like problems, like hurdles that we have to get over, and we're gonna win this damn Oscar for Sophia.
Oh yes, yes, and as someone who has seen Two Women before, I wasn't able to rewatch it prior to this recording, But, when I chimed in with my rankings for Kevin's survey on Twitter for And the Runner Up is, Sophia Loren easily came in first for me. And, despite my earlier comments of this being Natalie Wood's finest hour, she does not get my win here, even though, strangely enough, she does get my win for her other nominations for Rebel Without a Cause in Love with the Proper Stranger. But, I attribute not her not getting my vote here to the state of our competition.
I do have a question to ask though, in regards to Natalie Wood. Do you think in another year Natalie Wood could have won for this performance, or did she ever really have a shot at winning this,
Hmm.
regardless of the competition?
I've thought about that somewhat. I guess maybe if you swapped her nomination for Love with the Proper Stranger and this one to different years, like if say she was in contention for Love with the Proper Stranger in 61 and Wonder in the Grass in 63. I guess that's the only realistic scenario where I could see her being a threat to, well, having a greater shot of winning. But
Gotcha.
the other years, well, it's tough because, well, in 60, well, that should have easily gone to Shirley MacLaine, but no, Liz Taylor ended up winning, which MacLaine responded with, I lost to a tracheotomy. And in 62, well, you already have the feud Betty and Joan factor of it all, especially
Yeah.
with, Joan Crawford accepting on behalf of Anne Bancroft over Betty Davis. And in 64, well, you have Julie Andrews and Mary Poppins. 65, you have Julie Andrews
Christy.
versus Julie Christie,
Yeah.
latter of whom end up winning. So, yeah, well, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, I guess it's just one of those cases where it's like the nomination is the win. There's like no matter what year you put this performance or film, it's just you're not gonna win. Sorry, honey.
Well, yeah, but hey, good on Wood, who, and on of this year in particular, appeared in two Oscar-winning films that won 11 Oscars overall. So hey, I'm sure she had a great night watching all the wins.
It's also funny that West Side Story won every single category except screenplay, but Splendor in the Grass is the one that wins original screenplay. I do find that a little funny.
Well, yeah, although obviously West Side Story's contended in adapted.
Yeah, and I mean that. Well, I don't know if I'll be able to cover. I don't think I'm going to be covering that year for adapted screenplay, but all I will say is that West Side Story was not winning adapted screenplay that year. That is not the kind of film that the writers would go for. And it made a lot of sense for them to go for Judgment in Nuremberg over West Side Story, despite West Side Story overperforming and winning every category. Even George Takei,
Chakiris.
Chakiris, thank you. Despite him winning the Oscar, it's like in kind of an upset because I don't think people at the time were expecting him to win. Uh,
No.
George. So
Yeah, in fact, Cody Derrick's of Next Best Picture. The original West Side Story is his favorite movie of all time, yet even he questions Chakiris' win.
yeah, I yeah, it was just one of those things where it's like no matter what, it's gonna happen. Like yeah, George was just in the overall stronger film. Um, that leads me into my next question. Do we think Warren Beatty was number 6 for lead actor?
Hmm,
Like
that's a good
potentially.
question. That's a good question. I can see a scenario where his Golden Globe win in a dated category could have helped, and that's all. In fact, let me take a look at the guest bonus mentions from Kevin's survey of who they felt should have received a Best Actor nomination that year. I know Beatty was definitely among the five, or well, yeah, I know Sidney Poitier was also among the five for Raisin in the Sun, but that film got no nominations. Yeah, and well, I don't know if Richard Bamer could have gotten in for West Side Story, despite Russian, yeah, many considering him a weakling, including Bamer himself.
Yeah. I'm also seeing here, yeah, Warren Beatty. He also got in the drama category for Splendor in the Grass, which is interesting.
Hmm.
Um, okay.
And there's also Clark Gable in The Misfits, Marcello Mastroianni in La Dolce Vita.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so again, tricky year, especially with the limited precursors we had back in the day.
Yeah, no SAG. BAFTA was after the Oscars. No Critics' Choice. Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
well.
although I guess one question I do have if the Screen Actors Guild had their awards way back when, as I was recently rewatching the film, I have wondered if this could have received a SAG Ensemble nom.
Maybe? I know that West Side Story and Judgment at Nuremberg would have gotten in for ensemble, like pretty easily would have gotten in for
Mm,
those.
yeah, and
Um,
maybe The Hustler.
yeah, I think The Hustler would have gotten in because it had at least 4 or 5 actors. Um, yeah, maybe
Yeah,
Splendor of the Grass could have gotten in for ensemble, maybe.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, especially helped when you have an esteemed actors director like Elia Kazan at the helm.
yeah, because yeah, I keep forgetting he's like a known theater director and film director as well. Yeah, I think he would have. Yeah, probably would have. Yeah, I think that would have happened for ensemble. So, all right.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments you want to bring up about the award section for Splendor in the
Oh,
Grass?
well, maybe we should touch on the fact that Natalie Wood was nominated for this and not West Side Story, especially in light of recent news that actors can now be receive two nominations in the same category if they both make the top five.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, uh, oh,
Good. Good.
okay. Now, regarding Wood's performance in West Side Story, if you go to the award section on her IMDb page, you'll notice that she didn't receive a single citation at all for that movie. I mean, not even a Golden Globe nomination for Comedy Musical Actress, and this is already consensus among film Twitter, but also appeared so with critics and the Academy at the time that even those who loved West Side Story didn't find her performance to be a key takeaway. I mean, the supporting characters are usually seen as the standouts in any iteration of that musical, and clearly everyone felt that Wood's work in Splendor in the Grass was better, which I will admit, even though West Side Story is among my top, the original West Side Story is among my top 10 favorite movies of all time, I do agree that she was nominated for the right movie in Splendor in the Grass. In fact, in a 2020 HBO documentary, Natalie Wood, What Remains Behind, they showed an archive interview where she was asked about, why wasn't she nominated for West Side Story? Her response was, well, I was nominated for Splendor in the Grass.
Yeah. I also just think that, I mean, yeah, you look at the two performances, she's given a lot more complexity performance wise with Splendor in the Grass. I don't mind her in West Side Story, although I personally actually didn't mind. I actually thought Rachel Zegler did a better job in the remake, although I didn't think the the Tony character was that great casting wise. But we can talk about that
Yeah,
another
I
day.
will say I easily prefer Bamer's Tony to Ansel
Yeah,
Elgort's.
yeah, easily. Um, but yeah, no, but I did yeah, I did think Rachel Zegler did a better job than Natalie Wood, even though I think Natalie Wood's a very talented actress. I mean, with this and with Splendor in the Grass and Rebel Without a Cause, that alone tells you like, oh yeah, she was a terrific actress, and really showcased some of her best work. I would argue.
Oh, Oh yes, and well, yeah, and of course, Wood's casting in West Side Story is obviously very dated at this point, and
Yep.
given that she was a white performer playing a Latino character. It was also brought up in the documentary that it's one of her most iconic roles, yet she would never be cast in it today. And in fact, Daniel Montgomery, the former senior editor of Gold Derby, wrote a column on his blog late last year comparing and contrasting the 1985 Kiss of the Spider Woman with the most recent movie musical version. And one point he brought up was how the former was made during a long era when Hollywood cast straight, cisgender white actors to play everything under the sun, especially since the main character of Kiss of the Spider Woman, Melina, was in 1985, as Daniel said, played by renowned queer Latino actor, checks notes, William Hurt?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really odd. Like to have him play that character. But yeah, it's of the time period, you know. I mean, there's definitely certain roles where I'm not that hot and bothered by. I mean, maybe it's just me. Um, but there are times where it's like, yeah, if we were to remake this now or even just cast this with a new cast, you wouldn't want to recast the same actors for these same roles. Like again, William Hurt and Kiss of the Spider Woman. It's a great example where it's like, we wouldn't do this now, guys. Come on.
Yeah, or even also from 1961, Mickey Rooney playing an Asian character in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually was watching clips of it right before we got on to record, and I was like, I remembered it being really bad. Maybe it's just the makeup. And then I watched some of it. I'm like, "Ooh, okay, never mind. I take all that back. I take it all back." So, yeah.
Yeah, but I'll admit, the first time I saw Breakfast at Tiffany's, I didn't even know it was Rooney. It wasn't until like afterwards I was like, wait, that was Mickey Rooney?
Yeah. He's just so good at playing that character. Is it? Yeah, no. I'm
Yes.
that's sarcasm. Okay, everyone.
Well,
Um
yeah, or as Homer Simpson said, oh, by the way, being sarcastic.
yeah. Yeah. What Jeffrey said. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
really have much else to add on the Splendor in the Grass award section. I haven't seen the rest of the lineup, so I'd have to find out what my thoughts are on them. Maybe when I get around to some of the other ones, I'll definitely get around to Two Women, La Dolce Vita. I'll get around to as well. I think it's you said it was like Federico Fellini directed that, right? And
Oh, yeah, La Dolce Vita.
okay. Yeah, I'll probably get around. Yeah, I'll definitely get around to watching that. I think for my Patreon down the road.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, that'll be an interesting discussion. So everyone, you'll hear my thoughts on those episodes whenever said guests sacrifice themselves. I mean, volunteer to cover on those episodes. Hey, you don't know Jeffrey. I mean, I haven't. I mean, well, you do know how those movies are, so you probably have a better idea of like what films I may like or dislike. But it's always a mystery box when I get to these older films because there have been a couple lately. I think even our mutual friend Jack Mahanes had talked about where I've seen a couple of older films lately, and he was very surprised of my reaction on some of them. And I know some people are going to give me looks on it. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I'm moving on.
Hmm.
But that's what happens, you know. I do appreciate, you know, one of the many benefits once again about this podcast is that I get to look back at the older films and check out to see what were films that my mom or my grandparents grew up on and be like, oh, okay, that's what was existent of the times, or that was what was so popular at the times. Because, you know, doing a show like this, I probably wouldn't have been able to discover a good chunk of these. Like, I wouldn't be going on my way to watch Splendor in the Grass on my own. I'm like, what's that old movie? I'm not gonna watch it. Okay, and it's like, oh, it's for a podcast. Okay, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Well. Before we go, I should add that if I were a Academy member back in the day, I'd honestly easily give this the best original screenplay win. I mean, of the other nominees, I did enjoy Lover Come Back most, although the remaining three personally just weren't my thing.
Yeah, like I said, I'll have to I'll watch them down the road. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
How I feel about them,
and
especially Lover Come Back.
hmm yes, and not to mention that other Oscar nominations I felt Splendor and the Grass deserved. I also would give this a Best Picture nomination. And on a side note, I feel this Breakfast at Tiffany's, The Children's Hour, and The Innocents, if they were nominated alongside West Side Story, it to me would have made for a real killer lineup.
For sure. Again, I can't really comment too much on it, but it would have been an interesting conversation to have about what would have, you know, I mean, the lineup as is, from what I remember, it is pretty good with The Hustler and Judgment at Nuremberg. Um, like those are pretty good movies, I would say. And then West Side Story, it's like, yeah, it's good. I like it. Maybe not as much as those two, but still pretty good.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So, anyways,
Yeah, and I also obviously would have given Splendor and the Grass nominations for Best Director. I put in a good word for some of the performances, such as Warren Beatty in Best Actor, Pat Hingle in Best Supporting Actor, Audrey Christie in Best Supporting Actress, and also wouldn't have minded showing up in film editing, which I felt Gene Milford's work in that department kept things moving very, very well as score, costume design, and production design. And for a period film, it is kind of surprising it didn't show up in either of the latter two.
so it sounds like you would have given this almost double digit nominations.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if I go that far, but I certainly consider it.
Okay, nice. All right. Yeah, like I said, that's very interesting. And yeah, like I said, I appreciate exploring something like this on a podcast. Yeah, if nothing else, I'm definitely more curious in seeing, or at least looking at more of William Inge's work. His plays and his movies that were adapted into Oscar-winning feature films. So we'll see what happens with that.
All
Um,
right.
but yeah, so anywho, before we officially sign off, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show to discuss the film, Splendor in the Grass. Is there anything you'd like to plug on where listeners could follow you along after the show is finished?
Well, there's lots of ways you can find me. I am on Twitter at Jeffrey Kare and Instagram if you'd prefer that social media handle, and at Jeffrey Kare. And in my profile, well, at least on Twitter, you can find a link to the accounts for my website, Care Reviews. If anyone's interested in learning more about my taste in film, I am on Letterboxd, again, at Jeffrey Kare. And you can also find more of my work on Broadway World and Gold Derby.
Yeah, I ditto. Agree. Follow him on Letterbox. Follow him on Gold Derby. Follow him on his site. Really interesting work you have going for you, Care. Keep up the good work, and yeah, I always find it interesting. Whenever I get a chance to read your work, I'm like, yeah, that even some of the articles you've written have been really good. So yeah, I
Oh, yeah.
appreciate that. So thank you.
You're
Um,
welcome.
and as for myself, you could follow me and the show through Linktree under at Matthew995, where you can follow along on all my social media accounts, such as Twitter and Letterbox. On the same site, I provide a link for where you could listen to more episodes of our Lone Screenplay Nominee podcast show, as well as some of my written work on Substack. I'm also a guest writer for the Awards Garage, where I'll be writing more reviews for the site. Please check them out as soon as you can. As of this recording, I had two new articles that came out for the Awards Garage, which were the Cannes Film Festival was going on, so I did a top 5 films that competed in competition for the Palme d'Or. Highlighted some films that I think are that ones that I've seen, obviously, that I would recommend people check out or at least take a second look at. And then the other one was, since when you think of the Cannes Film Festival, Jeffrey, what do you think of? Fast and
Fast and
Furious.
Furious.
Yeah, yeah. So what did I do? I ended up writing a retro review on it, and I have it on the site. And yeah, that was just something I was not expecting to write, honestly, until I realized I was like, wait a minute, this is coming up soon for like a midnight screening, and it's already like the 25th anniversary, so why not? I'll just write the review. So I wrote the review out for the site. And yeah, and the last thing I will say before we go, speaking of links, I just want to ask that everyone, if you can, hop over to our After Hours Patreon, where for $3 a month, you'll have access to exclusive reviews on films we won't cover on the podcast. I've already had Jeffrey Kare on for a wonderful episode discussion we had for Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, which I thought was a very interesting and fun discussion we had, especially with how it won the Lone Production Design Oscar.
Oh yeah.
And it's always interesting to cover those kind of movies, to be like, how the hell did this managed to win, especially like not just a lone tech winner, but just without a precursor. Anyways, so check out the episode in full where Jeffrey and I dissect on what we think may or may not have happened, and they're pretty much structured like our Lone Screenplay Nominee podcast episodes. But if you're not interested in being a paid member to support the channel, or you just don't have the finances to cover it, it's only $3 a month, as I said. Just pass it off to someone else, and maybe do a little bit of word of mouth advertising for me. Any and all advertising would be greatly appreciated. So thank you very much. In the meantime, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and we hope to see you at the movies. Take care, guys.